Good morning, and on behalf of Mobility Ways, it's my pleasure to welcome you to this latest Thought Leadership webinar. For those new to Mobility Ways, we are a leader in transport decarbonisation and the leader in tackling commuting emissions with a focus on advancing sustainable travel at strategic employment sites in the UK and beyond. The aim of these regular sessions is to support learning and invite collaboration on transport and sustainable travel topics. And today we are considering the intersect between people, places and planning with a dive into the UK's Department for Transport's connectivity tool. The connectivity tool was made public at the end of 2025. At its core, it measures how easily people can get where they want to go. There is much to this modelling tool, and so I'm absolutely delighted to be joined today by Rob Singleton and Greg Haigh from the DfT for this first ever public showcase. Rob is Head of Planning and Transport and the architect of the connectivity tool who has seen the initiative from project inception. Greg is Head of Data Science and so most definitely the most qualified to lift the bonnet on the inner workings of the product and demo the tool's capabilities. We have an hour for this webinar and are aiming for sufficient time for questions, so please add these as they come to you, along with general comments via the Q&A function. Comments or questions that remain once we hit the hour will be followed up over email. A reminder also that this session is being recorded. A link will be circulated after, so you'll be able to watch back and share with colleagues. Okay, so enough from me for now. Rob, Greg, over to you.
Cool. Thanks, Graham. I'm Rob Singleton. I'm the head of planning at the Department for Transport. I'm really happy to be here to sort of showcase a little bit of the connectivity tool and what we think it can do for you guys. I know that it's quite a mixed bag in terms of audience participants. So happy to take questions as they occur to you. Please do put them in chat. And as Graham said, we'll follow up if necessary by email if there are any that are outstanding. Next slide, please. So obviously we're talking about connecting people and place, sustainable locations and connectivity tool. Next slide. What we're going to be talking about today is what me and Greg actually do, which I think is quite important to understand. Equally, the context that we sort of develop the connectivity tool within, and then the connectivity tool from its inception to its release, what it can do for you and what you can use it for. And then I'm going to give you a little bit of a sense of what the next steps are or the future of the connectivity tool may be. So next slide, please. So I head up the strategic planning policy team at DfT. Our principal aim is actually to align the spatial and transport planning systems. We've been doing it since 2019. We're a centre of excellence. We're quite unique in Whitehall insofar as we act kind of principally as consultants. So we touch every single part of DfT policy, as well as our arm's length bodies policies. But also we're the principal conduit into MHCLG, so the Ministry for Housing, Communities and Local Government, in terms of how we make the planning system better reflect DfT priorities moving forward. One of our second principal aim is to decarbonise the transport network, deliver modal shift more generally and reduce social inequality. So you might be aware that we've recently changed national planning policy to make transport planning more vision-led. So setting outcomes, sustainable outcomes that you want to achieve, and then reverse engineering the means by which you would do it. But also we're here to sort of use transport as an enabler to growth and development. So ensuring that development up and down the country is truly infrastructure-led. It's been certainly part of the government rhetoric for a while. We're the people that sort of realise it, and the connectivity tool fits beautifully within that pillar. Next slide, please. We also work with our sister team, the Housing and Growth team, and this is about DfT's role in delivering that housing. So how do we build 1.5 million homes? How do we ensure our mayors are held to account with funding for city region sustainable transport settlements? But also we've set up Platform 4, which is looking to deliver 40,000 homes in the next few years through land disposal as much as anything else. We understand that the growth agenda is a real opportunity to embed transport at the heart of housing delivery, but also jobs delivery. So we're working with MHCLG to ensure that things like their New Towns programs, their New Homes Accelerator, etc., 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 appropriately and properly considers transport from the outset. And there's a lovely little quote there from our Secretary of State, Heidi Alexander, who is very clear that you should be developing in and around transport hubs. In this particular quote, around railways. Next slide, please. And this is where I'll hand over to Greg.
Morning, everybody. As Graham said, my name is Greg Haigh. I'm Head of Data Science at the Department for Transport. So I lead a small team of about 8 people doing various data science projects in the transport area. So our work falls into sort of 2 broad areas. The first shown on the left is around transport analysis. So within this, obviously we're working on connectivity. You'll hear lots about that today, but we have a number of other projects that we're involved with as well. So just to give you a flavour, we have a project that uses the geolocators of buses to try and help us understand how well bus services are working around England and Wales. We have some situational awareness work where we're using sort of novel data sources to help us understand issues that occur on the transport networks earlier, so we can remedy those more effectively. We do lots of work looking at transport pattern analysis as well, try and understand how people like to travel. And as an example of this, we've been doing a lot of work around mixed mode integration. So can we understand how well multi-stage journeys work for people when they're taking a bus to a train station and then an onward train? Is it possible to integrate those 2 legs more effectively? So that's the kind of transport analysis side. The other broad category of our work is around artificial intelligence. So we're doing lots of work at the moment trying to automate departmental processes. So a good example of that is an analysis tool that we've developed to help us automate the analysis of free text responses to consultations. So the department does about 60 consultations a year. We regularly get tens of thousands of responses, often with lots of text in that needs reading. So we've been using machine learning and AI techniques to help us do that more effectively and more quickly. We've also got a number of projects in the computer vision area. So we're doing things like trying to measure vehicle excise duty evasion, detect fraud in grant applications. We have a very interesting project using aerial imagery to help us understand where how HGVs tend to move around the country, to help us plan the rollout of charging infrastructure for when electric HGVs become more prominent on the roads. And finally, we have an interesting project looking at road safety, where we're trying to understand the sort of key drivers that impact the severity of injuries caused during traffic accidents. Thanks, Rob. Back to you.
Cool. Next slide, please. So I think underpinning all of this is the need for the Department for Transport. I think we're a very forward-leaning government department, and we really understand the role and the critical role that transport plays in the delivery of growth. But also, we need to be very clear that the only way we can do that is doing it in a coordinated fashion, aligning spatial and transport planning so they respond and speak to each other very clearly. The connectivity tool has a very, very clear and distinct function in that, both denotatively and connotatively, because at its heart, it aligns transport data with land use data. So as a fundamental principle, align spatial and transport planning in data terms. But how are we going to achieve this? Well, we think it takes a lot of leadership to achieve this, that everyone has a part to play in achieving better alignment of the spatial and transport planning systems. We have to support innovation. Data is an innovative way of looking at our built environment, our spatial environment. And we need to make sure that we're using data in a way that improves plan making and decision taking up and down the country, but also recognizing the benefits that these types of approaches bring. Next slide, please. So what does transport driving growth actually mean? Well, it provides us the opportunity to consider how transport is planned for, but more importantly, planning for new development around existing transport hubs. You might have noticed in recent planning reforms, there's a far greater emphasis on development around transport hubs, particularly railway stations. That all developments must and should be easily accessible by walking, cycling, active travel, and public transport, putting people first, putting people at the heart of place. And then equally making sure that we're delivering the right infrastructure to support development up and down the country so we can catalyse that economic growth. Next slide, please. So I'm going to give you a bit of context for the connectivity tool, sort of where its sort of foundations lay in terms of the government's ambition. Next slide, please. So obviously, as you know, government's got a lot of missions. The biggest one is the growth mission. We've set a very ambitious task of delivering 1.5 million homes in this parliament, but it's more than 1.5 million homes. A parliamentary term is 5 years. This is like, 10, 20, 30 years. We will always need to provide new homes. So the actual number is probably far larger. So how do we do that? Next slide, please. I think it's really important to say, well, what's the provocation here? Why do we need housing? Do we need housing? Well, yes, we do. We do need to create new houses. We do need to create new jobs. We do need to make sure that infrastructure supports those jobs to ensure that we're maximising and optimising development sites. And we have to recognise that land supply is scarce. It's not scarce because you can't... It's not scarce because there aren't specific environmental protections that you need to make sure that you preserve, but it's also scarce because it doesn't actually become available that often. So if land supply is scarce, if we need infrastructure support development, and if we need to build more housing and jobs, the question is not about whether you build it, it's about where you build it and how you do that sustainably. Next slide, please. So what are we trying to do? Well, we're trying to get away from the current picture a little bit. We're trying to foster a paradigm shift. We know that we're not developing land in the way that we probably should. We're building at far lower densities than our European counterparts. We tend to build in greenfield sites, so non-protected sites, but still, typically farmland. But these are isolated from public transport. They build in car dependency from day one. They're often built at marginal viability. You limit choice in the way people move. It makes actually a very inefficient use of land when you sort of take that approach. And that's despite record levels of infrastructure investment up and down the country. And that ultimately results in suboptimal outcomes. So the connectivity tool is predicated on how we change the current picture. Next slide, please. So what are we trying to get away from? Stuff like this, where people aren't really first. Cars seem to be more first than anything else. Equally, as you can see from these are very low density developments with a significant amount of things like car parking and stuff like that, but also built at very low rises. And this is typically because they haven't got good access to the transport network from a public transport and active travel point of view. Equally, you tend to find that some developments up and down the country are even built without pavements. So actively disincentivizes people from walking and cycling. Next slide, please. And next slide, please, because I think this is an animation. There you go. So what are we trying to achieve? Well, something a little bit like this. I mean, people have their critics in terms of high density or more optimal density mixed-use sites. This is Woolwich Arsenal. But it's certainly a development that would not have occurred without a data-led transport focused approach. Next slide, please. So what we definitely know, and I think what is self-evident in terms of the spatial and transport planning systems, is that transport outcomes are intrinsically linked to spatial choices. If you put something in the middle of nowhere with no option on how you might travel, then you're always going to build in some level of dependency on one mode or the other. Equally, spatial outcomes are linked intrinsically to transport choices. So when we choose to make an infrastructure investment, it can make a meaningful difference to the spatial outcomes for our communities. And this has been evident for decades. Next slide, please. I've said it's been evident for decades. It's also evident to our key stakeholders, and some of the people on this call may actually have been part of some of these studies where we've identified that we're not doing things in the right way, and that we are actually not realizing the proper opportunities and potential for growth up and down the country. Next slide, please. But interestingly, the spatial planning system is about what gets built where, and the fundamental principle that underpins it is how you deliver sustainable development. And the golden thread through national planning policy is that sustainable development cannot occur without transport. But why is there this disconnect? Next slide, please. So part of this is we've got a very good planning system that should work in England in a way in which national planning policy informs local planning policy, and you get a synergy of the two, so you can align infrastructure delivery with housing growth. Next slide, please. But how it often works in England is that whilst national policy is quite strong in terms of trying to secure sustainable patterns of development, it's interpreted differently at local authority level, which leads to variable outcomes. Next slide, please. There are structural barriers that prevent this synergy. For example, transport planning sits with DfT, spatial planning sits with MHCLG, transport planning sits with your county councils, spatial planning sits with your district councils, unless you're lucky enough to have a unitary authority or a combined authority. And that means that there are structural barriers to people collaborating over things like local transport plans versus local plans. Next slide, please. And this leads to variable outcomes, as I've said before. Ultimately, national policy is interpreted at a local level in a way that is useful. It uses very similar language. So it talks about sustainable locations, it talks about sustainable transport, it talks about transport policy with sustainable transport embedded in it, it talks about sustainable transport improvements, it references sometimes the local transport plans, but ultimately the evidential requirement for what actually constitutes sustainable location is notably absent. Next slide, because there's a little animation. Being very clever with these slides. We've done a little bit of a study. We looked at every local plan that had been adopted in 2022, of which there were 14. And what we found is that whilst every single one of them reflected the need to deliver sustainable types of development, not one of them had that evidential requirement. And this is where we feel the connectivity tool fits in. And equally, what we've done to national planning policy that's currently out to consultation. Next slide, please. This has carbon implications, not locating development sustainably, not ensuring that sustainable transport is the first choice for travel, active travel or public transport, means that in this particular slide, you've got the assessment of carbon impacts pre-local plan and post-local plan. And what you tend to see in these, and this was from the Central Lincolnshire local plan, is that as a result of having a local plan in place, basically all carbon emissions from everything except transport is reduced significantly. And this shows that we're not really doing things in a meaningful way to support sustainable growth. Next slide, please. It also means when we're building in car dependency and we're building in more remote and less sustainable locations, that alternative travel modes actually can't compete. Not only because you're not often reaching the critical mass that you need to reach to make, say, a new bus route viable, but also people move through convenience as much as anything else. So the Royal Town Planning Institute done a study between 2015 and 2019, looked at car journey time for new 50 plus units up and down the country. And effectively, it showed demonstrably to all of the key locations, alternative modes of transport could not compete with car journeys. So you were embedding from day one people's preference or default choice to travel by car for the majority of their journeys. Next slide, please. So what is the connectivity tool? Well, we think we're filling this gap. We're rising to the challenge of the UK growth mission. You'll notice there's a lovely little animation at the bottom. can't take any responsibility for that because I'm useless. But we did ask ourselves a question at DfT: how can we tackle the growth challenge? How can we build the homes we need, maximise the use of sites? How can we plan and provide for infrastructure needed to support sustainable growth? So it's not just about the houses, it's about the services that people were able to access or be connected to. And it's also about the infrastructure needed to support their journeys. How do we improve the connectivity of underserved communities? This is not just about new development. This is about communities that are already isolated and reconnecting them to the destinations they need to get to. But also, how do we raise the bar on the expectations we set for not only local authorities, but developers in exponentially increasing the delivery of new homes? And the answer to that for us was that we needed a commonly agreed definition of what a sustainable location is to empower policymakers and decision takers to do things differently and better. And to do that, we thought we needed to take a data-led approach, create an unambiguous metric that is used routinely and consistently applied at a national and local level. And to do that, we thought we needed to understand the relative connectivity of places. Next slide, please. So we had a few hypotheses when we started this journey. We understood that the quality of data on transport access to different land uses is inconsistent and difficult to access. So data sets sit in different organisations. Equally, the ability to access that data varies from local authority to local authority, which means you inherently lead to variable transport and spatial outcomes. That data on connectivity, the ability to move from one place to another to get to the destinations you need to get to via the transport network, could improve spatial and transport policies and decisions at all tiers of government. That data-led approaches can support the better alignment of spatial and transport planning. Connectivity tool is very Ronseal on that. It does denotatively combine transport data with land use data. And then equally, a clearer and more certain definition on sustainable locations, that evidential burden can help raise the bar on the expectations for new development. How much you build, where you build, and how you build. Next slide, please. So we had some early priorities for the tool, that we needed to make it speak to both the planning and transport planning systems, that we needed to have a breadth of integration of different data sets, that it needed to be scalable at a national level, that it needed to be inclusive and easy to use for the end user, but also that it could highlight the co-benefits and trade-offs of different types of locations for new development, but also, as I say, reconnecting isolated communities. Next slide, and I've got a feeling I'm handed over to Greg. Not yet. It's the one after. Anyway, proof of concept. So none of this is rocket science. I've said right at the beginning, it's evident that you need to align the spatial and transport planning systems, and that you can do so from a data-led approach. We took a lot of inspiration from London's citywide public transport accessibility level metric, or PTAL, which has been embedded in London planning policy since 2004. What public transport accessibility level is a data-led metric that basically measures everyone's ability to access public transport in every 100 by 100 metres square in the whole of Greater London. It gives it a value between 0 and 6B. And the higher that number, the more accessible to public transport you are. It created an unambiguous metric of that. But what was interesting about the approach that was adopted by the Mayor of London, Ken Livingstone, in 2004 in the first London plan, was he used that metric and embedded it in planning policy in a very novel and innovative way. Namely, he set very clear expectations of where development should be located based on its accessibility to transport. And he set minimum density standards and maximum parking standards for those types of development. So I'll show you again, Woolwich Arsenal, that wouldn't have happened were it not for public transport accessibility at the density and at the mix of uses that it provides. And it's been instrumental in London in driving up average density. It went up by about 144% between 2004 and 2011. So it could be transformational in a change if applied elsewhere. But the connectivity tool is the next evolutionary step from public transport accessibility level. And Greg will go through why it's the next evolutionary step. Next slide, please. So this is what PTAL looks like, 100 by 100 meter squares, looks like a heat map, very similar to the connectivity tool. But like I say, with the next evolutionary step. Next slide, please. And now I hand over to Greg. Seamless, that was seamless.
Sure. Yes, I'm going to talk through the sort of the basic idea of the tool and the methodology that's used to calculate the metric that underlies it. Next slide, please. Okay, so first of all, what is connectivity? So it's a metric that's intended to show people's ability to get to where they want to go. So we account for lots of different things that are dependent on that. So we look at different destinations, modes of travels, and travel time. It's an index measure showing relative connectivity. So this we calculate a score between 0 and 100 to make representation a bit easier. And effectively, a score of 100 is assigned to the most connected place across England and Wales. And a score of 0 is effectively a place where you can't really get anywhere within the time period that we consider. So we express the metric as a heat map, and we have an individual score for every 100 meter by 100 meter square around England and Wales. So it's about 15 million squares. And we had to perform over 20 trillion calculations to work all of this out. So yeah, we consider 6 main locations: shopping, visiting people, work, education, entertainment, and health. So these 6 main locations account for the vast majority of journeys. And we also consider different modes of transport as well. So we look at public transport, cycling, and walking. And we present different scores that show different permutations of these. So you can look at an overall score, but you can also drill down and look at, for example, connectivity to workplaces by public transport, etc., or education by walking. Next slide, please. So this slide shows a bit of intuition around why this metric is different to a metric that is focused primarily on access to the transport network. So on the left-hand side, consider the situation where you're looking at an access to network metric. And this is based purely on the proximity to public transport stops and the frequency of the different services. Okay, so that's very helpful. It's a very good start. But what we try to do with the connectivity tool is go beyond that. So we're not just thinking about how easy it is for people to get to public transport. We're thinking about how long it takes them to get from their stop to where they're going. We're thinking about the value of the destinations that they're going to. We're thinking about how frequently people go to those different types of destination. And we're thinking about things like diminishing returns. So the 11th post office you can get to within 10 minutes is probably not that useful to you. We try to account for that. Next slide, please. Okay, just to illustrate that point, if you look at the scenario at the top where you've got a bus stop, there's a bus every 10 minutes and there's a 30-minute journey. In that example, within that time, you can reach a variety of destinations that are useful. So workplaces, schools, hospitals, etc. Consider the scenario at the bottom. You've got the same transport frequency and journey times. So there's a bus every 10 minutes. It takes 30 minutes to take a journey, but it only takes you to a location where there are no useful services. So in both of these scenarios, an access to network score would result in the same value. But when you're considering connectivity as we do, you can see that the top scenario that actually results in people being able to travel to useful places they want to get to, it gets a much higher score compared to the example at the bottom where they can't really reach any destinations within the same time. Next slide, please. Okay, so here's a bit of a snapshot from our tool. And you can see that for every 100 meter by 100 meter square, a score is presented, and you can kind of very easily, sort of intuitively navigate the map and explore different areas and look at their relative levels of connectivity. And then you can do things like drill down and understand the different permutations that I described earlier. So you can look at walking to schools or public transport to workplaces, etc. Next slide, please. Okay, so the tool has two principal functions. The first we refer to as the analytical function, and this provides you with the ability to kind of explore different areas and assess the relative levels of connectivity compared to other places. It also allows people to investigate the overall connectivity score and break down by modes and destinations. It also provides some intuition around the routes that contribute most to the connectivity score for a various area. So you can see sort of local trains and buses that travel from a certain area and how much they actually add to the score. You can also print off results that give you a breakdown of everything behind the score. And there's also a local authority view as well that enables you to have a bit more visual differentiation of different connectivity scores across a local authority. Okay, next slide, please. The second area of functionality we refer to as propositional. So what this does is allow people to plot in new bus and rail routes and specify details about those around the travel times between stops, etc. And this then goes away and it calculates the change in connectivity that results from that new intervention being delivered. This is an area of functionality we're looking to develop further in the future by adding things like land use changes. So you might want to add in a new school and see how that impacts the education connectivity of a given area. And we're also looking at adding different types of routes beyond buses and trains to also include active travel, like walking and cycling. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is the technical bit. So here's I'm going to try and talk through the methodology that we use to calculate the metric. I think it's inevitable that it's fairly complex because we're trying to account for all of the important factors that actually have a material impact on connectivity, and you can't do that without it being sort of reasonably sophisticated. But I'll give you a kind of a whirlwind tour of the sort of headline aspects of that. So first of all, for each area we consider 6 categories of destination. So we look at all destinations that can be reached within an hour from a given starting point. We also consider the value of these different locations as well. So an office block with 1,000 jobs 10 minutes away contributes more to connectivity than an office block 10 minutes away with 50 jobs. Okay, next slide, please. Okay. That we then calculate the travel time from our starting point in each 100 meter by 100 meter square to all of those destinations within an hour. We do this by using comprehensive public transport timetables. So we know if people start from their home and they want to travel 50 miles by 50 miles to work, we know that they'll walk to the bus stop. That'll take 5 minutes. We know what time the bus arrives. We know how long it takes the bus to get to the train station. We know what time the train comes and how long it will take them to take the train to close to where they work. And then we know how long it will take them to walk from the train station to a given office block, for example. We do similar things with walking and cycling as well, using representative travel speeds. Okay, and we also try to take account of congestion using our in-house knowledge of that through our statistics. Okay, next slide, please. We also take account of diminishing returns. So every additional type of destination of the same type contributes less within a given area. And we do this by, this is dependent on the type of destination as well, because we know for certain destinations, people value choice. And for others, certain destinations are quite homogeneous. So if you need to post a letter, one post office is as useful as 3, effectively. So we, as I said, account for journey times, and we use something called an impedance function to work out how much more of a contribution you get to connectivity from a shorter journey. So if it's half the time, should it add twice the amount? And we base this off travel patterns that we observe in the National Transport Survey. We weight together all of these different scores to give you an overall picture. So for instance, to get to overall connectivity, we weight together public transport, walking, cycling, etc. And we do that in the proportion that people tend to use those different modes. All right, we also consider different times of day to account for the fact that buses and trains are more frequent in peak times, and congestion might be higher at certain times on the road as well. Right, next slide, please. Yep, I think I've talked through that one already. So next slide, please. Great. So we've rigorously tested the methodology and refined it along the way. So we know that it's important to have a robust, reliable, and easy to use tool for people to use in their everyday work. And through the development process, we've done 60 user testing sessions on different functionalities with local authority officers across planning and transport. We've also spent 6 months piloting the tool with local authorities, doing workshops and exploring real use cases of use in practice. We've published our methodology. It's been out for several months, along with a published version of the data for people to explore. We've invited comments and scrutiny, and we've been working on the feedback that we've had. Yeah, and just a quick thank you to those 60 people who went through the user testing for us. Next slide, please. Okay, so the connectivity tool is about systemic change. So if we integrate it properly into policy, it creates a possibility to achieve systemic change on a number of priority areas. So the first is certainty, that the tool can give an earlier and clearer answer to what kind of development is appropriate and where. The next is speed. So the tool can be used to speed up the processes like local plans and site assessments. It also creates a better level of information for policy decisions, and provides a common, robust evidence base, allowing people to integrate evidence into their decisions more easily. And hopefully it creates less duplication, saving time and money for local authorities in particular. Okay, I think that's my last slide. Thanks, and back over to Rob.
So, to wrap up in the couple of minutes we've got left, I think our ambition here is that the future is bright and the future is a heat map. Next slide, please. So we launched the tool. We originally launched the tool for local authorities on 26th of June 2025 with a keynote speech from Minister Lillian Greenwood and a message from the Chief Planner, Joanna Averley. We subsequently launched Connectivity Lite on the 11th of December, but also broadened access connectivity, the main tool, to everyone for free by request. You just need to ping us an email. I think there's a question in the Q&A about that. And we will send those details following this session. It's jointly badged with the Ministry for Housing, but also Active Travel England. It can be accessed via gov.uk and one login, but Connectivity Lite can be accessed anywhere by anyone, anytime. And it's free to use for everybody, not just local and central government users, private sector as well. It's fit for purpose, as we've said before. It's robust and ready to use now for real world policy application. There's a written ministerial statement that also endorses that fact. Next slide, please. Also, we've just published the draft National Planning Policy Framework, the biggest update to the framework since 2012, probably, really. It's currently out to consultation. It closed on the 10th of March. It references the tool throughout and the importance of connectivity. It puts a greater emphasis as transport as a driver of growth. It also links connectivity and a measure thereof to setting of density standards. Policies TR1 and TR3, which will become common language. One is about vision-led approach to transport planning, and the other one is about locating development in sustainable locations, directly references the tool, as does the definition of connectivity in the glossary. I always say, I mean, don't get me wrong, the consultation document itself is something like 100 odd pages, and the document itself is about 100 odd pages with lots of questions throughout that you're invited to respond on. But definitely look at it, definitely make representations. We really want to hear from you. So get cracking. 10th of March, got about a month. Next slide, please. So how do we think we can use the connectivity tool? To be honest with you, you can use it in a multitude of different ways. You know, I think from the purposes of plan making and decision taking, we expect the tool to be used in, for example, the local transport plan, development local plan, developing spatial options, site allocations and assessment, so the evidence base that underpins local plan making. We expect to use it in master planning and area specific plans, including neighbourhood plans or any supplementary plan. I think they used to be called supplementary planning documents. Now they're called supplementary plans. We expect it to be used for spatial development strategies, infrastructure delivery plans. Equally, local authorities who have a health or education agenda can use it for those specific purposes because it disaggregates between different types of uses. Statutory consultees can use it in commenting on local plan proposals. We expect it to be used in local plan examinations, and we expect it to be used in things like design codes. And those are just the tip of an iceberg, I would argue. Next slide, please. But it can also be used in decision taking. So as a plan making and decision taking function, it can help a developer analysing potential interventions needed for a site. So with that propositional function, what happens if I put a new bus route here? It can help a local highway authority or other bodies acting as statutory consultee to inform their consultation responses. It could be used by local planning authorities in setting their Section 106 supplementary plan document, or even negotiating individual developer contributions. Transport authorities, same difference. It can provide good data for optioneering of new or enhanced transport routes. It can help with local authority funding allocation, but also assessing the suitability of a given site for particular types of development management. Next slide, please. So we've launched it. We want you to use it. We also want to develop it. And one of the things I certainly saw in the questions is, you know, how are we going to help people use the tool? Well, we've already published guidance on how to use the tool. We will be running drop-in and support sessions. We will be, as this is one of the roadshow events, we'll be looking at capability building in due course. And equally, really importantly, like I said about the consultation response to the NPPF, we really want to hear from you. How are you using it? What problems are you encountering? How can we help you use it better? Next slide, please. So we're going to continue to innovate with new features of the tool. Obviously, Greg mentioned that we're going to expand the propositional side to include land use and active travel. We'll be doing that relatively soon. We're looking at integrating the tool with policy and practice. Obviously, you've seen that the NPPF now references the tool. Obviously, that will be subject to the consultation outcome, so please do make representations. But we're hoping that we better integrate that in wider policy and guidance, including local transport plan guidance. We will be publishing, and again, it was in the chat, we will be publishing planning practice guidance for transport assessments to adopt a vision-led approach, and the connectivity tool will feature as part of that. But we're also looking at how we can better integrate the tool with GIS systems. And like I say, Really want to hear from you. My door tends to be open. I'm a bit rubbish at responding to emails, it turns out, but I'm still happy to have a conversation at any point about how you are using the tool and what improvements we might need to make. Next slide, and I think that's the last one. Questions?
Fantastic. Thank you both, Rob and Greg. Really good. I've just been sifting through some of the questions. We'll come to them in a second. Just while we give people another couple of minutes just to add questions. Upcoming webinars for us, you'll see them on the screen. I'm not going to talk through them, but I think links to both of those to register are being put into the chat, and obviously emails will come out in due course. So, yeah, if we can move off that and move into questions, I think for me, there was lots about how is this being updated. So how is data being updated and refreshed? Things like and how, for example, are new infrastructure that's planned there's gonna come on board at some point being kind of considered in the model. So yeah, just general sort of things. I saw something about road and rail, also not road and rail, bus and train stations and how much it's catering for train stations. Things like is seems to be only catering for walking to a bus or a train station, but what about other modes? So yeah, just generally kind of your thoughts in terms of future development.
I'm happy to pick these up. So firstly, around updating the data. So the tool's underpinned by a variety of input data sets. So we're kind of, in terms of being able to update it, we're reliant on those things being updated. Most of these are annual. So we're looking to produce annual updates going forwards to provide a reasonably up-to-date representation of how things are on the ground. In terms of planned infrastructure changes, the best way to incorporate those is via the propositional function, I think, because those proposed changes won't actually feed into the data we use until they've been delivered effectively. So the best thing to do is to focus on the propositional function. There was a question around accounting for different ways of getting to railway stations, either by walking, cycling, or taking the bus. So we don't have a separate rail connectivity score. We've lumped together all public transport into one measure because we sort of recognize the fact that often people have to mix modes in order to get to the destinations they're trying to reach. And it's very difficult to disentangle those things, those separate modes, without sort of creating unrepresentative journeys that don't mirror how people actually travel. So we do assume that people walk to their nearest bus stop and then take a bus to the train station if that's the quickest route, or we assume they walk. So I think we're kind of well covered on those aspects. The one omission is accounting for people who cycle to a railway station. So that is a potential limitation. So we'll have to think about how we could incorporate that.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. There was an interesting one around reverse connectivity as well. So looking at it the other way around in terms of the destination and going back from there. Is that possible?
So I'll answer this just really quickly. I know Greg probably is better to answer it, but I might as well because I've just piped up, innit? So you can actually select residential as your destination. So yeah, technically it reverse engineers it. It depends on what the end user wants to use the tool for, but it's perfectly capable of doing that.
Fantastic. And just, I mean, I'm assuming there are some real-time data sources within it as well. So just keeping, you mentioned annual updates, I guess, in terms of infrastructure and sort of destinations, but some of the transport pieces will be real time.
No, none of it's in real time,
Okay.
unfortunately. No.
Okay. Is that something that will probably look to incorporate?
I think because we're working at a national level with a
Sure.
very, very fine level of geographical granularity, it's very difficult to get data sources on a consistent basis for the whole of England and Wales at that level of detail. So it's an aspiration, certainly, but I think with some distance from being able to achieve that.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to note that it's really important to have a consistent output of the score. Because if you're going to use it in, say, determining plan application or making a local plan or doing a local transport plan or being a statutory consultee, it's not very useful if that figure keeps changing. So if it changes like from one day to the next, how are you getting that certainty and non-variability of outcome? So you need to have a consistent baseline, which is why sort of that real worldy type stuff, what is happening if you walk out your door, like City Mapper does and stuff like that, isn't that useful in that more strategic plan making sense.
Fantastic. Yeah, and I mean, very good point around variability. You mentioned, Greg, time variables. So you've got that ability within the tool to look at this based on, I think there's 4 time variables built into the model, into the methodology.
Yeah, so we consider different times of day, but we aggregate those to give an overall score. So we can drill down and see how that contributes to connectivity at different times. But yeah, in terms of the interface, we only present a single figure for each location, which represents a kind of a weighted level of connectivity over different times of day.
Okay, very helpful. Thank you. You mentioned MPPF, Rob, consultation. So hopefully, yeah, absolutely. We've got several hundred people here today, so hopefully you're going to be inbox is going to be inundated with activity. Just some things around Matthew Snedker. Thank you, Matthew. Comments around minimums and maximums. With all of this stuff, will there be a move towards minimum density requirements and or parking maximums rather than parking minimums?
So
Maximum.
if you have a squizzle at the MPPF, it does a couple of things. One thing is it sets quite clear policy around expectations of density around rail stations. That's a minimum density standard. It also states in the document that local authorities in certain circumstances should look at imposing their own maximum parking standards or minimum density levels based on, amongst other things like connectivity. There isn't a push in the MPPF where there is a national mandation of outside of the rail station policy of minimum density standards. It will be for local authorities to determine that themselves. However, the MPPF is out to consultation. I'm really interested to hear people's views about the MPPF and the policy that's adopted. As I said right at the beginning, I think transport is coming out very strongly in the MPPF now, probably more than it has done ever, possibly. So very interested. I strongly encourage everybody on the call, if you haven't looked at it, certainly look at it. And if you are so inclined or wish to, definitely make representations because the government wants to hear from you.
Brilliant. There was a question around sort of expectations around this. So obviously at this point it's launched, being encouraged. Obviously you're talking about the various use cases for how this could be used, how it could be expected to be used by local authorities, planners, private, etc., etc. Is there sort of a future looking in terms of when this might be more than encouraged, might become mandated, or what's the thoughts around it being a tool that is a de facto tool, I guess?
Policy tends not to mandate anyway. Law does. Policy doesn't necessarily. People might have different opinions about that, but I'm not going to get into it. What I will say is we created the tool for the purposes of being able to basically level the playing field and give everyone access to something that can be consistently applied with consistent output. And I would say that people will use it routinely. I think it'd be a bit odd if they didn't, because I think it's a very, very useful thing. But it is a useful thing. It's something that assists in people's abilities to do plan making and decision taking. It isn't the answer to life, the universe, and everything. But I would imagine it will have the same impact as PTAL did in London. I am a planner. Let me be really clear. I'm a transport planner and spatial planner, so I'm pretty rare. But I used PTAL in my local authority every day when I was working in development management for a variety of different tasks, and there was a policy, for want of a better word, mandation there. There was certainly a policy position there, which meant I did need to use it. But ultimately, I used it for determining, describing a site, saying what density it was supposed to be at. I was using it in policy making as well. It had a multitude of uses in my day-to-day job, and I think the connectivity tool can help people do their day-to-day job. But it is help. It isn't the be-all and end-all, even though I love it dearly. I mean, my mum might use it at one point or another if she ever decides to move house and wants to find out how connected a new house might be.
Very true, very true. And it's interesting you mentioned your transport and spatial planning. So obviously, I was really interested about sustainable development cannot be delivered without sustainable transport. This is a supporting that, perhaps a little bit of disconnect between authorities when it comes to responsibilities for transport planning and spatial planning. I think in the questions there was also throwing in the mix around highways and transport, and ownership of all of that. I guess, do you see LGR, do you see devolution as a vehicle for enhancing all of this kind of stuff, and then connectivity all becomes even more visible as a consequence?
Yeah, 100%. But I will say one thing is I think it's important to acknowledge that the government is asking a lot of local authorities at the minute, whatever tier of government they are at, whether that's your combined authorities, whatever. One of the key jobs that my team has is to try and join a lot of those dots so that it's a coherent framework of policy and guidance that speaks to each other. So what we're working at the present moment in time is how we get at developing guidance that effectively links things like local transport plans with spatial development strategies, with local plans, to give that coherence as a whole and assist local authorities in achieving what they achieve brilliantly, but will achieve even more brilliantly in the future, which is that strategic thinking piece and making sure that we're delivering sustainable patterns of development underpinned by transport. And equally, the development industry as well, they've been really welcoming to the connectivity tool. It's been really good, it's been really positive. I think people can see the value in taking this type of approach. And I think it is incumbent on government to make sure that we're joining the dots. There was a question about vision-led planning practice guidance. It is coming, trust me. It's one of the integral pieces of this bit of work, but it will be coming, I promise.
Fantastic. I think it was in one of your slides, Greg, about what came out to me around data quality. We see this all the time as Mobility Ways working with strategic employment sites, that need for granular origin destination analysis. I think we're poor when it comes to, or rather less, we could be better in terms of the quality of data we've got. I've heard from mayors in the past, we need to know where people are going. So this is perfect in that regard. I'd like to give you, there's two things. One, let's just make sure everybody understands how they get hold of this connectivity tool. So that's something for yourself, Rob. Also, I was really interested, Greg, in all of those projects that you talked about at the start. Again, really interested about how this audience can find out more about those projects. How do they keep informed on those projects? So yeah, the last 60 seconds, guys, make sure that people know how to get hold of you and what they need to do.
Right, cool. I'll go first, then Greg can go. So you want to get access to the tool, and you want to get access to the full tool, which includes the propositional function. The light version of the tool does basically everything else. You can email us at connectivity@dft.gov.uk. We send you a form, you can fill it out, and we will give you access. Like I say, it's not a high bar to get access. Don't worry about that. Google it. There are other search engines, but Google it if you want. It'll come up. You can get access to Connectivity Lite without any logon whatsoever. You can do it now. Connectivity Full, you do need to have a login, which means you have to register on gov.uk. But that's it. Defo do it. My name's Robert Singleton. If Robert.Singleton at dft.gov.uk. If you've got any burning questions or you want to have a moan, perhaps, I don't know. No, if you want to get in contact. That's my details. But Greg.
Okay, I'm afraid I don't have a very good answer to this one. So I'd like to say we have a nice website where we present all of our projects, but we don't. So I think if people are interested in what we're doing, I'm very happy for people to reach out, and I'll put my email in the chat.
Perfect. Well, we've got
Thank you.
there was a load more questions. So as I stated at the start of this one, we'll take those questions away. We'll extract them where we can identify the person who's put it forward. We'll do a response to those individuals, and perhaps we'll take some of those anonymous ones as well, and see if we can't do some kind of little update after this. But thank you, Rob. Thank you, Greg. Thanks everyone for your time today. We'll finish up there. Thank you very much.
See you later. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye bye.